Hey, what's up guys? It's Shamrocked here with another weekly dungeon build guide for you guys. So this is basically just me going through what talent builds I would take for each dungeon for this week. So note that the affixes this week are Tyrannical, Entangling, and Bursting, which is actually a great push week for a Tyrannical week. Because of a Tyrannical week, like it's already a little bit harder than a Fortified week, I would say, just because bosses can become really tough, especially in this season's rotation where a lot of the bosses are tough. But that being said, this is a great push week because bursting really isn't going to affect your bosses at all, and it's not going to be super detrimental to the full dungeon run as well, because most, if not all, groups now pretty much run with the Shadow Priest, and they can just mass dispel the bursting when it gets high. And then we have a lot of cooldowns in our own right that help deal with bursting, so that shouldn't be an issue. And then entangling, most classes have an option, a talent, or just an innate ability that they can immediately get rid of the entangling, including us, which I'll get into in a second. So entangling really isn't something you have to worry about as well. So with that being said, I'm just going to go through each dungeon that I have here, just give you the talents. I'll also include the imports in the video description and the details, so you can just go ahead and copy those directly. Even if you don't fully agree with the talents, you can at least sort of get a starting point and then tweak it from there if you want. So because it's entangling, you're going to notice that I take Thunderous Pause for every single build for all dungeons. Thunderous Pause is an automatic way to get out of entangling. It removes all snares and increases movement speed by 25% for the first 3 seconds. The only caveat with Thunderous Pause is that it only occurs once every 20 seconds, and it happens whenever you go into Ghost Wolf, regardless of if you have any snares or anything. So just be careful. You could accidentally put yourself in a situation where you Ghost Wolfed, and then forgot about it, and then when you actually go to use it for entangling, it doesn't work because you're within that 20-second time frame. So just be extra careful with that. Otherwise, this talent is perfect. It's amazing for dealing with entangling. It's also great for some of the dungeons in general, which I'll mention when we get there. All right, so starting with Brackenhyde. Brackenhyde, pretty basic. On the left side, I do go Guardian's Cudgel, mostly for the trash at the beginning, but also for the trash in the second area as well. I go Stone Skin Totem, once again, for the trash in the beginning, but also because it helps with the bleed on the first boss, which is a great way to handle that. I also go Thunderstorm into Thundershock for the knockup, once again, because this is a very trash-heavy dungeon. That's what I would take to sort of help the group out with that. Otherwise, I've gotten rid of Ancestral Defense and Fire and Ice just because it's not really needed for this dungeon. This dungeon is very low on the healing until you get to the last boss, in which case if your group fails the totem DPS checks, you will be required to heal quite a bit. But best case scenario, that doesn't happen, especially because they just nerfed the last boss and added 2 seconds to the cast timer on the totem. It should be much easier for groups to handle. I actually did a 25 this week with this build, and it worked totally fine. But so yeah, keep going. I have 2 points in Surging Shields, only 1 in Swirling Currents, just because Surging Shields gets a little bit more value because there is a lot of tank damage just because of the amount of trash. So just keep that in mind. Moving on to the right side of the tree, you'll notice I have all 3 DPS talents. I have Stormkeeper, I have Lava Surge, and I have Master of the Elements. The reason for this is pretty much just for the last boss, so that you can help out with the totem. Stormkeeper is a great ability to help out with the totem, and if you're weaving in hopefully instant lava bursts from Lava Surge to buff Stormkeeper with Master of the Elements, it's just a really good sort of trifecta of DPS to have for that boss. So that's why I have that. I only have 1 point in Ancestral Vigor. Once again, there's not a lot of healing to be done. There's not really a lot of abilities that will one-shot you. And to be honest, this whole dungeon is basically determined by whether or not you can kill the totems in time on the last boss. And if you can't, you have a few cooldowns to help tide you over while the damage is happening in Ancestral Guidance, Ascendance, all that stuff. So you should be able to handle if a couple of bursts go off from the totem on the last boss. So yeah, anyways, that's what this build is really modeled around. It's maximizing your DPS on the totem and being able to heal when you need to. Next, moving on to Vortex Pinnacle. Okay, yeah, here we go. Sorry, I think my internet's lagging a bit, so the visual might be a little bit off, but anyways, so moving on to Vortex Pinnacle, few points for the left side. I have Thunderous Pause, once again because of Entangling. I have Purge because it helps out with some of the trash. If you have other Purges in the group, like a Master Spell or the Demon Hunter thing or like a Blood Elf thing, you actually don't have to take Purge. I would use this point elsewhere, probably in Surging Shields or maybe even Elemental Warding if you wanted the reduced magic damage. But yeah, anyway, so that's why I have Purge, but you don't need to take this if you have other stops. Earth Elemental is going to help you on the last boss, Assad, if you get the Chain Lightning targeted on you. It's a good defensive for that. Other than that, I also go into Totemic Recall and Creation Core. It's mostly for Neltharus, the dragon boss, but it can also be helpful on the last boss if you're not managing your Cloudburst totems super efficiently, or if you just, if there's extra damage going out, maybe your group isn't handling it the best, or the stars aren't dying in time, having some extra Cloudburst is going to help you out there. On the right side of the tree, go full points into Ancestral Vigor if you're running higher keys, just because it's going to help out with the last boss and the Chain Lightning, second boss, even the first boss as well. You can also go Wave Speaker's Blessing if you want, if you feel like you need the extra healing. This is going to help with your Forset bonus, because it's just going to help Tidewaters a little bit more, and it's just going to help if you're using a P-Wave style, which you should be. So yeah, that's it for Vortex Pinnacle. Next, moving on to Neltharus. So on the left side, I have Guardian's Cudgel just because it's actually very useful on some of the trash here, specifically those little fire, I think they're called like lava flares that cast the melt. And it's useful for the Thaumaturges in the first area as well. Also take Thundershock once again for both of those mobs I just mentioned. But other than that, you want to go a pretty heal focused build. So you want Swirling Currents, you probably want the cooldown reduction for Cloudburst Totem as well. And all of that is going to help you with with Magma Tusk, which is a tough boss, as well as the Forge Master, and the Chains boss too. All of that's going to help with that. Looking on the right side, so the only thing really special about here is I do have 2 points in Ancestral Vigor, once again because I'm running higher keys. If you're running lower ones, you probably don't need it, so you could maybe put this point into Stormkeeper, or if you wanted to, Wave Speaker's Blessing. However, you'll notice I run Flow of the Tides for this dungeon. The reason I do run Flow of the Tides is I feel like it helps out a lot with the damage profiles of the bosses, specifically for Magma Tusk, especially now after the nerfs, and also for the Forge Master. I feel like it really lines up well with the way he does a lot of burst damage, and then it turns into a dot, so you can sort of use Flow of the Tides to beef up a Cloudburst, and then end the dot damage on the Cloudburst. Also note, on my YouTube channel, if you're not familiar, I have guides for most of these bosses as well. So if what I'm saying about a boss maybe doesn't make sense, or it's something new to you, you can probably go and watch the guide that I have on the channel, and that might clear things up. Moving on to Halls of Infusion. This is an interesting build, just because, like, for me, I had to play around a lot with it. I was able to heal 24 Kajin last Tyrannical week using this build, and I feel like maybe I could do a 25. I don't know. There may be a few things that need to be tweaked, but this I can at least guarantee you is good for a 24. So Kajin is the third boss. It's the boss that requires insane HPS check. And yeah, basically you're basing your entire build around that one boss, because as a shaman, it's a little bit tougher to heal than some other classes. So you really need to be on your game, and you need to have the right talents for it. So with all of that being said, I have Totemic Recall and Creation Core for the extra 2 Cloudburst for Kajin, which I find really useful. I have Elemental Warding to help out with the damage on Kajin, as well as the damage from the last boss, because that gets pretty dicey, especially on higher keys. Full points into Swirling Currents. And then I also have 1 point in Surging Shields. Surging Shields actually doesn't really proc for Kajin, which kind of sucks, but if you have the Shadow Flame embellishment, or if anyone else in your group does, you can actually use Earth Shield to heal them for Kajin. But anyways, if you wanted to not use this point, you'd probably put it into Earth Elemental instead. Or if you wanted to, you could get rid of Surging Shields and maybe 1 point in Elemental Warding, and then you could go into Fire and Ice and Ancestral Defense for that extra leech. And that might help you out as well. So there's a few different ways you can do this left side. On the right side, once again, this is interesting. I have Flash Flood. I found it really helped out with Kajin, just being able to not panic as much and go for your Tidebringer chain heals. It just allows you to get some faster healing rains and some faster healing waves in as well. But in order to do this, I have no DPS points, which is kind of sad, but necessary for that boss, in my opinion. I only have 1 point in Ancestral Vigor. This is questionable just because the last boss can one-shot very easily if it gets a lot of stacks. So having the second point in Ancestral Vigor might be nice, but my philosophy is other classes work without this, and you're going to have a Shadow Priest in your group, which is going to give you their 10% HP buff with Fort. So really it's a toss-up. Once again, I found on a 24 Ancestral Vigor was not needed, the full 2 points, but it's really up to you. But with having 1 point in Ancestral Vigor, I'm able to get 2 points in Flash Flood, 1 point in Wave Speaker's Blessing, and just have a really nice healing focused build. Okay, moving on to Underrot. Underrot, pretty easy dungeon. However, don't be fooled. Krogmaw can be really tough, and the last boss, if you're running really high keys, can also, it has hands. It can do some big damage as well. So with that in mind, I do have Creation Core and Totemic Recall for the extra Cloud Bursts. This is pretty much just for the last boss, because you are going to be running through your Cloud Bursts pretty much through the whole fight. If you feel confident in healing without this, you can, take these 2 points and put them elsewhere, probably into more CC for the trash. But that being said, for CC, I do have Thundershock just to help out with the stops on the worms that sort of spew everywhere and can one-shot you. But other than that, pretty standard once again. I don't have points into Surging Shields. There's not a lot of stuff that really hurts the tank here. But I do have points into Swirling Currents for both Kragmaw and the last boss. On the right side, nothing special here. I once again have 2 points in Ancestral Vigor because I'm running the higher keys, but if you're running lower ones, you can take these points away and put them into Stormkeeper and maybe Wave Speaker's Blessing if you wanted to. Once again, totally up to you. This is also a dungeon where I run Reach just because the damage profiles for most of the bosses are pretty, sustained rot damage, especially for the last boss and Kragmaw a little bit. So yeah, that's why we take Reach for this dungeon. Moving on to Freehold. Freehold is a tough one on, well, actually it's really tough on Tyrannical and Fortified, but it's tough on Tyrannical for the last boss and for the first boss. So in order to help alleviate that, you definitely want to take Stone Skin Totem. It's going to help out with pretty much all of the bosses, except ironically the Shark boss, because all that counts as nature damage. But yeah, Stone Skin Totem is definitely going to help you out. You want the cooldown reduction for Cloudburst, once again for that last boss when he starts sort of chain casting at the end. But other than that, because it's Freehold and all the trash sucks, I do have extra CC points. So I have Guardian's Cudgel, I have Thundershock Knockup. And then you'll notice I don't have Ancestral Defense for this one because most of the damage you take is not considered area of effect in this dungeon. So you can use those points elsewhere. I have them into Surging Shields and, like I said, my extra CDR, or sorry, my extra crowd control. But once again, you can sort of tweak this however you want if you don't agree with the choices I've made. On the right side, I do play Flow of the Tides here, as well as Wave Speaker's Blessing. Those may seem redundant, but it actually, I find Wave Speaker's Blessing helps you'll notice like Riptides sometimes last exactly when you need them to for Flow of the Tides, because you kind of want to aim at Riptides that are just running out. Wave Speaker's Blessing gives you a little bit more leeway with that. And I find personally Flow of the Tides is perfect for Freehold. The damage profiles, it's super bursty, all of the trash, all of the bosses, very bursty, and Flow of the Tides is going to help you, heal up the group very quickly in those situations. Next, moving on to Neltharion's Lair. So this dungeon is really going to come down to, actually, no, it comes down to a lot. It's going to come down to the first boss, first of all, if your group can kill the ads quick enough. But also to help with the first boss, you can take Stone Skin Totem, as the shatter damage that he does is physical. So that's going to help out with that. Other than that, for Neuraxis, you definitely want to take Poison Cleansing Totem. It's a really big help for that boss. And then I would suggest going into Totemic Recall and even Creation Core if you can afford to, as that's going to give you extra Poison Cleansing and Cloudburst for Neuraxis, and then it's going to give you extra Cloudburst for the last boss, because the last boss has some pretty heavy sustained damage once the lava pools come out. Other than that, I don't have a lot of CC. I don't take Thunderstorm or Thundershock, and I don't take Guardian's Cudgel. The reason being is that on a Tyrannical week, the trash in this place really is not that bad, and you don't need to worry about stopping it other than using Capacitor Totem and Wind Shear. And your group should have other stops for the Pelters, so you should be totally fine without that. Nelth's Lair is another dungeon where I highly recommend taking Flow of the Tides. Flow of the Tides, once again, really nice for bursty damage windows. It's great for Neuraxis, very bursty. It's great for Rockmora. It's great for the trash. The only thing it's not amazing for is the last boss, because like I said, that has some pretty sustained damage, but you should be absolutely fine with the cooldowns at your disposal. It's not like an insane fight. And lastly, we go to Uldaman. So couple things. Uldaman, you would take Thunderous Pause even if it wasn't entangling. Reason being, Thunderous Pause is going to get rid of the dot on the last boss. So hopefully you have a priest for Mass Dispel, but if they're out of mana or it's on cooldown or whatever, you can get rid of your own dot with Thunderous Pause, and then you can dispel somebody else, and that really helps out. Otherwise, I do have Stone Skin Totem, as this reduces the damage from the Crushing Stomp and the bleed on the snake boss. But other than that, I do have some CC talents here, so I did go into Thunderstorm and Thundershock to help out with the ads that cast the Hail of Stone. Those need to be stopped ASAP, so that's going to help you out there. I would love to go into Guardian's Cudgel as well for this boss, or even the Static Charge, but I just find I don't have the points. What you could do is, if you trust your group not to have the curse go off, the Curse of Stone that the adds towards the end of the dungeon cast, if you have another curse to spell in your group, or if you just trust your group not to let that go off, I would take this point out of Improved Purify Spirit and I would put it into Static Charge or Guardian's Cudgel. You could also put it into Totemic Recall for an extra Cloud Burst, as that will help with Emberon and maybe the last boss as well. But totally up to you. I encourage you to take this build and play around with it. Uldaman is another dungeon where I take Flow of the Tides, mostly for the third boss, the snake boss, as well as Bromak. I think it helps with him. But this is really a toss-up. I feel like for Uldaman, you could take Ancestral Reach or Flow of the Tides, whatever fits your style better, and be equally successful with both. So just do what you feel comfortable with. If you need to practice on a lower key, choose Flow of the Tides, see how it goes, then run it again with Ancestral Reach and see which one you like better. So anyways, yeah, that's all the dungeons for this week. Once again, Entangling, Bursting, and Tyrannical. If I have time, I will absolutely try and make another video for the next week, which is another push week. I think it's Fortified, Spiteful, and honestly, I can't remember. But I think it's Volcanic and Spiteful. So I will try to make a guide for that one as well. But until then, I will see you next time. I hope this guide helped you out. And yeah, enjoy the week. I hope you guys have fun.